Be seated. Kids, children, come on up. Come on, come on, come on. Just have a seat right in there. Yeah. You don't have to go all the way over there. You can just come right up here. Good. Hey. And I'll stand down here. What do you see? What do you see? A ruler. How many of y'all saw this as a ruler? What do you do with a ruler? Do you know? You measure things. Let me hold out your hand. Let me measure your... That's about 1 foot long. Did you know that? A measurement, I can stand this. Is this straight? Look at it real close. Is that straight? Is this straight? I want you to do me a favor, okay? Here we go. You sit up straight and look at me. All right. Now I want you to hold it like this, and I want you to go over this way and fold over, see how straight you are. Fold over. Come on. Oh, there. Good. Now come back up straight. There's another way of measuring. Did you know that? And it was by getting a long wire or a long blade and put a weight on the bottom like this. And like we heard last week, oftentimes in Old Testament times, they would call a plumb line. Can you say that? Plumb line. Now I want you to look up at the ceiling and see if you see anything that looks like a plumb line. See it? See, there's a big old thing at the end and then a straight. Now look at both of these together. Ready? A plumb line. And if something didn't measure up, it was out of plumb. But now this is in plumb. Looky there. Can you see that? Now I'm going to back up and do this. Now watch it real close. Tell me if it's in plumb. Is it? Can you see the difference? When does it get back in plumb? When does it get lined up? Right there. Yeah. Let me tell you something. Come here closer. Come here. Come on closer. Did you know that when plumb lines are laid out in our hearts and in our heads, plumb lines remind us of Jesus. And the Christian who we are, Jesus is our plumb line and always wants you to remember that whether you like it or not, God loves you. Come over here and I'll give you a plumb line. And I actually found one that looks good. That's a good plumb line. And I'll give you an invisible one right there. Okay. Here's the plumb line, but I'm going to give you an invisible one and go show you invisible. Come here. I'm going to put one right here. All right. Next. Come on up here. There we go. Now I want to stand right here. I'm going to give you a visible. Good. All right.
Did you sit back on Williams, right?
Could y'all follow that? Now, y'all going to have to look a little closer. Now, is that in plumb? Now, tell me when it gets out of plumb. See how easy it is when we're looking close? See, sometimes, do you ever find yourself, it just play like that this plumb line is, well, what's down at the bottom, just for fun. Yeah, we'll call that a cross. Do you ever sometimes feel like this? Huh? What do you have to do? Somewhere we have to do something to come back. Or sometimes we'll do this. We try to make Jesus come over here closer to us so we can finally get in. But somewhere, the idea of plumb line, I loved it from last week's Old Testament lesson, to remind us that God himself brings a plumb line, brings a point of which we can judge ourselves and our activities by. and at the same time give us a direction of what we ought to be doing next. So I always love that principle of plumb lines, because somewhere in the process, we got to remember what last week said and what this week kind of says, and I just want to kind of combine two different Sundays all in one fell swoop. Okay, if y'all don't mind. I mean, I'm just asking your permission, see? But I'm going to do it anyway. So there's a Amos passage said this. I hope you remember what the Old Testament said. God showed me a basket of summer fruit. Now, how many of you thought that was one of the greatest things since sliced bread? I mean, what's the big deal about that? No, but I tell you, we need to kind of pay close attention. God showed me a basket of summer fruit. Then God asked me, what did you see? And Amos, in essence, said, duh. I see a basket of summer fruit. Now, that doesn't seem very significant, does it? And yet, the more I studied this lesson, it was almost as if God, every once in a while, in fact, most of the time, at least with me, He has to make sure I'm paying attention. So He'll ask maybe a dumb question. What is this? A ruler. I want to make sure you see what's in front of you. Do you understand? You follow me on this? So sometimes all of us, when we're working so busy and doing things, we forget we got to make sure we know what we are doing, where we are, and what am I looking at, and what am I seeing. One of the things what do you see? We start seeing things that take place with the three characters. Remember the last Sunday, the Good Samaritan story had some characters in it. There was the Levite, and there was the priest, and there was Samaritans, and then there was the guy laying on the floor, or on the ground. Okay, 4 good characters that Jesus was trying to get something across. I like to tie it together of what do you see? Okay, well, the Levite, I was listening to how Steve was kind of playing with the character of the Levite last Sunday, and he was a younger man probably, and he was maybe confused. Maybe he had that sense of, I don't know what to do. You know, have you ever had that problem, you know? And so I love the idea of the possibility that Levite started the Anglican and Episcopal hymn called, Should I Stay or Should I Go? You know, it's that kind of, and so we have that great, marvelous opportunity of, we stand here, should I do this, should I do that? Have you all ever had that problem? Or maybe I have this one. And so all of a sudden, we get into this principle of, I don't know, should I do this, should I not? Should I do this, should I not? But the priest, I really want to come back to the priest. Looking at it from our perspective, we can say, well, that was an idiot. He just didn't care. Let me play out something, because the priest and Martha that we hear about today has something very much in common that we oftentimes forget or are not pointed out to enough. The priest had, I think it's Numbers 19 or something like that in the Old Testament. The holy ritual of a priest, he must be pure or the people will not see God. Now think about that. Here's the leader of the temple worship. This priest's responsibility is to be as pure as possible. Otherwise, the worship will not be of value. That's kind of found in the Old Testament stuff. Aren't we glad that doesn't happen now? Have you ever known any church leave because the priest wasn't up to snuff? You ever heard that before? You see, there's something about, we always understand that somehow the priest must follow these holy stuff. But boy, in the Old Testament, let me tell you, it was damnation for the worshipers if that priest somehow did something. So what do you remember the story of last week? What did the priest do? He saw the man lying by the side of the road. Without us passing too much judgment, let's just say he was doing his duty. He was doing what he was supposed to do. He passed him by. He wasn't distracted by anything else. Do you all follow me on that? Then there was a Samaritan. Remember him? Here's a guy that was not as hung up on rules and regulations for his worship. And he might have been doing something, but something happened as he walked by the road. And It was almost as if God said to that man, "What do you see?" What do you think the Samaritan did? What did he see? What did he see? He saw a man lying down there on the road. He saw first. He saw first. Then he said, "What should I do about it?" What should I saw? Sometimes if we don't even see what's there, we can't even ever get to the question, what am I to do about it? My wife, wait a minute. What do you, I bet she's not here, so I'm not going to say anything. Watch. Look at me real close. What do you see? A what? See, oftentimes we see with our own interpretation, right? We see with our own interpretation. Do you see a guy that's drunk? Do you see a guy that maybe is a diabetic and having a diabetic shock? What do we see? All we see is, here's a guy staggering around, right? Once we can see what's there, then God gives us an opportunity to say, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Let me tell you something. I don't think God makes us see all the horrors of the world at one time. But He does give us opportunity every moment of the day to see something or someone that we can respond to. Martha, bless her heart. Don't you know, some of you have been in the Episcopal Church long enough that Martha and Mary, they have Martha and Mary guilds, don't they? Y'all know that, right? And that usually means the Marthas are all the ones going to get something done, and the Marys are going to sit around telling everybody else what to do or just doing nothing. So we have this great division between Martha and Mary. Martha's the one, if you want something done, call her. If Mary, you won't get something done, don't waste your time. And it's always generally the Martha saying, I just wish Mary would get up and do something. Isn't that what happened today? But that's not what Martha was doing. Martha was fulfilling an obligation. She was the owner of the house. She was the hostess with the mostest. She had rules of appropriate ways of welcoming guests in the house. And she was about the business of doing what she was supposed to be doing. She made sure that the knife was on, I can never remember where the knife is supposed to go, but I think it's on the right? And then the spoon is over here. And then I know up here there's a couple of utensils that somewhere they're supposed to be. And when Jane says, go set the table, oh, brother, I know that the knife goes somewhere. But the protocol of right, absolute, perfect kind of hostessing is to follow all the appropriate rules. But did you notice what Mary did? And when Jesus said she chose the right stuff, it wasn't because she was sitting still doing nothing, but it was precisely because she was sitting still doing nothing, listening to Him. That's the essence of hospitality. How many times you've been talking with someone and all of a sudden you're spilling your guts out and you're thinking, and then they immediately say, oh, that's good, and then go off on something that they want to talk about. Have you ever had that experience? In other words, that person not really listening to you, and sometimes you're not listening to them, but we're just having a dialogue across each other. So what Mary did was to demonstrate what Martha was not doing. She was doing what she was supposed to do, but she had forgotten the reason why. She forgot why she was doing all of this. Why was she following procedure? She somehow saw that her whole reason for being is to make sure you get the things done right, as opposed to why are we doing this? Mary was there to give us the answer. You sit and welcome the guest by listening to them. And that's what the Bible says. Mary was sitting at His feet, listening. I think oftentimes her focus was on what she was getting done. Do you all ever find yourself distracted? Nobody here finds themselves? Really? Should I go? Should I stay? I've got too many problems. I've got too many things to do. My to-do list keeps growing. I scratch off 2. There's 7 gets down there. I have no time for anything. In fact, there's some of us that I'm so distracted because I don't have anything to do. See, distractions come in all cases. In fact, when I was going through my little, I wrote down a bunch of distractions, too many options, too many opportunities, too many possibilities, too many demands. Oh, does that sound real? Have you ever said any of those? Too many correct ways of doing things. Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheep, 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 talk a little, pick a little more. We just go on and on and on and on until someday somebody tells us, sit down and let the dust settle. Until you can figure out and see what's being, that's what I think Jesus is saying with his plumb line, is that somehow in the process, somewhere in the process, we can settle in enough, like Mary, just to be quiet long enough to see what's in front of our face and to give it time for me to decide what you do. I think I've told you this, told the potentate story. Do you remember that one? There was a potentate that lost his big red ruby out of his, whatever that thing they wear, and it fell into this water. Immediately he got all the people out of his crew and said, get in the water and find that ruby. Really get after it and do something. So they were screaming, and all of a sudden all the sediment at the bottom blew up and everything was getting mucky. And they kept working harder and harder and harder to find that ruby until a wise man came by and said, everybody, you know what do you think he said? Sit down. Isn't that interesting? But there's so much to do. Sit down. And so they sat down, and I can see a bunch of them that are accustomed, if you not do something. Till all of a sudden, guess what happened? All the settlement drifted down to the bottom. There was nothing but clear water and then a big red ruby that showed. So sometimes we find ourselves in need of acting what Mary did, to focus in on what we think is important to be attentive to, not what I want to do or my to-do list. I think I want to just leave you with a couple things like this. In a minute, you may hear these words. In a minute, you may. God is my salvation. Y'all say that. God is my salvation. God is my peace.
God is my peace.
Yeah, good. God is my... And you can add lines to that. Those kind of words, did you know that those kind of words, if they're said over time and we start believing them, then that's like a plumb line that comes down. God is my strength. How about this for a plumb line? I've been buried with Christ in his death. I've been raised with him. I've been forgiven for sins. Those are all good plumb line things that as those enter into our soul, then all of a sudden our actions start becoming different if we slow down enough to see who's in front of us. Now, I'm going to leave with this really wonderful poem, I think. I found it somewhere, and it's in a Celtic tradition. And it's a way of somehow getting in touch with the reason we're alive as Christians. It's that kind of activity that forces us to open our eyes to see deeply and to hear deeply the words that are in front of us and the people. Listen real close. I think it's kind of important. Some of you will hear this. Some of you will forget it. Some of me will wish I could do it all the time. But listen real close. I sought my God, and my God I could not see. I sought my soul. My soul eluded me. I sought my brother, and I found all three. See, there's something really crucial about what it means to be a follower of Christ. Is to answer before anybody says anything, I'll seek my brother, and I might, in point of fact, find God and my soul. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.